time, in circumstances in Barbados, it is absolutely necessary to do so. I know that to some members in this honorable chamber, the severance bill is seen as legislation that is sacrosanct. It is something that is untouchable, or rather shouldn't be touched, shouldn't be interfered with. And I know that some of my honorable colleagues will speak in terms of its protection against unscrupulous employers from time to time, and in terms of who would lay off workers and make them redundant and then seek to escape having to pay them appropriate severance. I say at the outset, it is important. It is something that is felt that you only amend or you interfere with when you absolutely have to do so. And at most times, I believe most governments would not want to amend the Severance Payment Act. It is a sunset amendment, and I say so at the outset, meaning that its provisions end on July the 31st, 2020. Mr. President, having said what I said in terms of the non-interference of persons not wanting to trouble the Severance Act, there's a saying that circumstances alter cases. And indeed, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is certainly, if we want to call it, put it mildly, a special circumstance. I've spoken, and all members have spoken earlier, in terms of the deleterious effects on global economies, and indeed in terms of the economy of Barbados. We have seen it, especially in terms of our tourism, which we are highly dependent on. And we spoke about the reduction in government revenue by $500 million, but we also must be cognizant of the reduction in revenue in terms of businesses and indeed in terms of households. And as I said earlier, all aspects of our economy have been affected. I believe COVID-19, the pandemic, has laid waste Barbados economically. There's been devastation. Hotels, manufacturing, the retail sector, small business, self-employed have all been affected. And I've been told that over 48,000 claims were made in the NIS as of earlier this week. And now we need to, as I said earlier, to get our economy going again. We recognize that in Barbados, from as far back as February, March, especially in the hotel sector, persons noted the cancellation of trips, the reduction in the number of tourists coming into Barbados for various reasons, in terms of the reduction in the number of commercial flights, and of course then there was a mad rush of persons who were already on spending holidays in Barbados, who were forced to terminate their holidays. Some had purchased 2-3 week holidays and had to terminate them and try to get back to the various points of origin. This had a terrible effect on our tourism in terms of hotel, in terms of the occupancy, and it always, of course, tourism affects a number of areas. Restaurant, the small business people, the tour operators, persons on the beach, involved in various water sports activities. So it has been a tremendous effect in terms of our tourism sector. It has also been, as I said, in terms of the NIS fund, it has also been a severe strain on the NIS. Having said that, in terms of spoken about the security of the severance, I can't sit down without mentioning the fact that over the years there have been persons have spent years waiting in terms of their severance payments. Indeed, there's stories over and over persons who have become deceased and they never were able to have access to their severance funds. I believe the NIS chairman spoke recently in terms of the number of claims that they've been processed. I believe it was 26,000 dating back to 2010, between 2010 and 2016. And that they had managed to try to clear the backlog, but still had a considerable number of these claims outstanding. And we might say that after 13 weeks that you are entitled to claim, but I believe the whole process, well, after 13 weeks, you have 4 weeks in which to claim, but then the entire process can become a more tedious one, to put it mildly. Having said that, in Barbados, there are a number of situations where businesses have been closed, persons have been laid off for close to 13 weeks, I believe, in some cases, and I know that the Honorable Senator Moore can probably have a more accurate view on this than I would in terms of the proximity of persons who have been laid off to the cutoff dates. But if we were to be theoretical and allowed and say that every person who had reached the 13 weeks or the 16 weeks within 18 weeks when it is not continuous, indeed, I'm told that in some cases, certainly in terms of calculations, that you would speak at about 250 to as much as $300 million in severance would have to be paid out in Barbados. In cases of some businesses, it would be more, they would go bankrupt. They would not be able to afford it. Some persons in the restaurant, in this business, I believe one lady was on the radio saying that if she had to pay severance, she doubts she could even get a loan to pay far more in terms of the turnover of her business. So there's some serious issues out there as it relates to severance. If we allow the businesses and hotels to remain closed, how does this help our economic situation? How does it help our economy? Indeed, how does it help our unemployment situation, which is rising daily? But again, Mr. President, it is not as straightforward as I try to put it. There are different perspectives. Of course, the perspective of the government of Barbados is to ensure that the economy gets moving, to protect jobs, and to maintain the social standards in Barbados, and of course, security and law and order, recognizing that if people are not working, if people are unemployed, they're not having their benefits, then we can have an increase in crime. In the business sector, we need them to be viable, to have some sort of financial breathing space so that they can continue these various activities, be it tourism, be it manufacturing, be it in terms of the retail sector. And of course, the workers. Workers, at the end of the day, need jobs. They need long-term employment. They need security in terms of working, being able to have a dependable source of income, and to be able to look after their families and their welfare, housing, feeding, nutrition, various things that they must have. So in approaching this, one has to take and be cognizant of the various areas and various entities and various groups to be covered. I must say also that it has not been an easy task coming here this evening in terms of this severance bill, and I know my colleague senator can attest to that. Regrettably, my colleague on it directly opposite was recalcitrant in terms of attending these meetings to see if we could get a coming together of minds on this issue in terms of working for the greater good of Barbados and indeed our society. There have been extensive and at times I would say intense discussions, and I put it intense. I say no more. The intense, I believe, covers it. Suffice to say, there was no exchange of blows of any kind, perhaps verbal, but certainly not physical. And the government started in a situation where, of course, the unions and the workers' position and the business sector, and primarily the hoteliers in this case, at the other extreme. Unfortunately, some members in this chamber would have heard a voice note of a hotelier speaking about the length of severance that it should obtain. And of course, there were some very well-known trade unionists who spoke about the severance bill being sacrosanct and being sacred and untouchable. We've had quite to give a bit of give and take on both sides, and I commend certainly the maturity, the frankness and candidness in which these discussions were carried out. And we believe we've reached a solution that is agreeable to all sides. I'm not saying it is a perfect solution, I'm not at all saying so. I'm not saying that it is a solution that every worker will be satisfied with. But as I said, from the perspective certainly of government, we have to be interested in the greater good, not the individual good, not the business good, not the average worker, but the greater good of the entire society, recognizing that if a situation like this is not handled properly, we could have a certain, not only economic collapse, but in terms of the way our society is structured and ordered, we would certainly need the prayers of Senator Rogers. And I have to get used to this new title. Mr. President, the amendments are outlined. I think all honorable members have had the opportunity to go through the amendments. I don't propose at this time of the evening to go through the details of the amendments. Suffice it to say, it speaks to the fact that persons who were laid off between the first day of March 2020 and the 30th day of April, in terms, and some of these would have been coming up for severance around this time, it speaks rather than 13 consecutive weeks to 22 weeks. And where it spoke in the past to 16 weeks, it now speaks of 18 weeks within a period of 24 weeks. As I said earlier, it is sunset amendment, which will end on July the 31st. The amendments also speak to the tribunal matters, and indeed, I have no doubt that honorable members will speak to many of these amendments. Mr. President, this bill, of course, would also require an amendment to the Constitution and would require a 2/3 majority. With those few words, I beg to move that this bill be now read aside.
I recognize Senator Franklin, first speaker.
Good night, Mr. President. Sir, this bill is a puzzlement to me. I do not understand what it is all about. It does not make sense. The first part of the puzzle, sir, is it says an act to amend the Severance Payment Act, Cap 355A, enacted by the Parliament of Barbados in accordance with Section 49 of the Constitution. There is no constitutional right to severance. You have a right to severance when you apply, but nobody under the COVID emergency stuff has accumulated that right yet. So if you were saying, well, you have a right and you made a claim, and the government was now taking away that right from you, then you will need a constitutional amendment. There is absolutely no need for that. No, there's no need for it, simply because you will pass this act tonight, and it will carry everything to 22 weeks. So you don't have a right to severance yet. So I don't know what advice this government, I don't know on law. Because they make too many mistakes. And too many silly mistakes that I don't know if they're rushing these things too fast and they're getting it wrong. Because, sir, I understand that you had to answer to the crack of the whip. The people who control the government from behind, those shadows. Because I saw somebody sent me something on WhatsApp where this hotelier was carrying on because apparently he had given the government instructions to pass this thing last week, and the government did not pass the piece of legislation in time, and he was livid. He was livid enough. I saw him here parading. Somebody sent it to me, but several people sent it to me. So this bill is in effect the government belatedly jumping to the crack of the whip. You're going to wait, tell you. And the thing is, if that person understood the Severance Payments Act, or if the people who advised the government along with that person understood the Severance Payments Act, they would do nothing. The easiest thing, and even if you wanted to extend the period for the Cyber Experiments Act, we are now in a state of emergency. And the cabinet can do anything in the interests of the country. And anything means anything. So they could have said, well, look, we're going to suspend the provisions of the Cyber Experiments Act for a period in one of the directives, and that would have been it. But you like to come in here and amend constitutions. You people like amending constitutions too bad, you know. It does not make sense. Look what happens here. I happen to appear before several tribunals at the time. Senator Tate, as a trade unionist, I have appeared before Senator Tate on a number of occasions. So she knows the cyber experiment legislation well. And I'm hoping, no, she's not responsible for backlog, she worked. And I'm not defending her, she's here. The problem with the cyber experiment tribunals and most other tribunals in Barbados is simply this. She's talking about backlog. In the 1980s, I think, you were in the House at the time, the Barbados Labour Party administration passed a piece of legislation called no, it is not senility, it is that you did it so long and you have not done it, Administrative Appeals Tribunal Act. It was passed and never brought into force. That act should have taken care of things like the Cyber Experiments Tribunal, Employment Rights Tribunal, these appeals for the town planning or whatever tribunals you have. You would have set up a proper system, and you would have a system out there that would be full-time. The problem with the Cyber Experiments Tribunal, Employment Rights Tribunal, and all these other tribunals is that you depend on retired persons, or if they're not retired persons, there are people who are active and busy in their own legal arrangements. So they can only take so much time out. And you don't pay them anything really. Because if you're a lawyer in private practice and you go to government do cyber experiment case, it is usually community service that you get, you know. You don't get a lot of money for it. Cyber experiment and the employment rights tribunals and that thing, the lawyers in that committee, they get paid pittance. So you rely on retired people or people who take a list out of their time, out of their workload to come and give service to the country. And they're really giving service to the country. But justice is not cheap. You cannot, for the sake of a few dollars, deprive people of their service. People are saying, right now, I am being bombarded by people who were made redundant by Hotel Grand Barbados, 2012. Their cases have not been heard by a tribunal yet. Right?
And 3 days.
Yes, and 3 of them have died. So you don't know, their estates will not get anything. Because you have to go before a tribunal and give evidence. You're not going to be able to give that evidence if you did. So since nobody hears your evidence, your case dead. So the family will get nothing. So that family has lost everything. They lost the loved one, and now they lost the money that person would have been entitled to had the cases been heard in a timely manner. So rather than blame the national insurance people and the tribunal people for not working fast enough, you can't work fast enough with the system you have. And because you can see a backlog going back from 2012 and probably, I don't know if there are any before, that means you got a lot of work to do. So you got enough scope for at least a couple of full-time people doing this work. But look what happens here. And that's why I say it was totally unnecessary for these amendments. You are entitled to claim severance pay if you are laid off for 13 weeks or if you have been kept on a layoff or short time for 13 weeks. And you're also entitled to claim if you were on a series of layoffs in 16 weeks and a 26 week period, you can also claim your severance pay. But in order to claim your severance pay, you have to terminate your own services and tell your employer, look, I done with that. You got me here suffering, whatever the access and whatever terms you use. But they have to convey that you want your money because you got me here and not earning anything. Or not earning enough. So when you do that, that's when your right starts. So nobody so far has things, so you're not going to need a medical insurance that way that right. They ain't got it yet. So the National Insurance staff will send the application now to the employer and ask them if they are contesting the claim. Some say yes, some say no. If whether you say yes or no, though, there's going to still be a hearing. The hearing is much easier if the employer says he's not contesting it, because then the tribunal has to determine that you're 16 years or older and under 67, that you work for at least 104 weeks, you know, and that you work a certain amount of hours or whatever else. But I'm not going to go through the whole list. So once that is established, the tribunal will say, well, yes, and that you're entitled to this money. And the tribunal then will order the employer to pay. If the employer got the money to pay, every employer who pays national insurance contribution pays to a severance fund. So they will go to the severance fund and pay that money. And then national insurance will seek to get back the money from you over time. At an interest rate of 1% per month or whatever else. No national insurance does it. That usurious rate of interest that they give you, 12% per annum. That being the case, because of the backlog I'm telling you about, it would be senseless for any worker, unless he's one of those workers who the employer's been treating very badly over time, trying to frustrate them out of a job, trying to get them to resign. So, because then you resign, you don't get anything. So some people with 20 years and 25 years take the humps and grumps that they get from the employers because they don't want to leave the money in there. So what this government has just done is to make these people hold on to get these humps and grumps for another 9 weeks. That's one way of looking at it. Because they got some people that want to leave. They want to leave really bad. But then there are others who it is not within their interest to leave, because if you leave, you will draw national insurance unemployment benefits for 26 weeks. You got 11 so far. Then you have to go before the tribunal, and it takes 4 years. At least 4 years to get your claim heard before the Severance Payments Tribunal. 4 or 5. So you take that long time to get that system, that thing processed through the system. Why would I resign from my job and claim severance, not out of work? So if the hotel pick back up, I go to work, you know. So I can't, and I claim a severance, so I ain't got the job to go back to. So will you wait for 4 years to get your severance pay, or will you wait a few more months and hope the hotels pick up so you can start back working? It does not make sense. But these things have not been explained to the workers, because Barbadian workers are not stupid. And if you tell them, look, this is the situation, but you feel like everybody can rush for severance pay in 13 weeks. If they rush for severance pay in 13 weeks, they're shooting themselves in the foot. Because national insurance, because most employers can tell you, we don't have the money to pay. And once you don't have the money to pay, you have to go on national insurance. National Insurance Severance Fund don't have the kind of money to pay everybody either. But everybody ain't going to come, because people want jobs. People don't look for severance. You get your severance pay and you're, let's say you're 35 years old, you get your severance pay and looking for a job. Much people don't hire 35-year-old people, you know. Especially not in the hotels. They want young girls. To be got a hotel in the West Coast now. As your look start to fade, they find a way to get rid of you. Sandy Lane. You know? No, I haven't caught no, but I still got my look, so they wouldn't get rid of me yet. But and they treat them. They're some of the worst employees in Barbados. I had to call them out. They treat people very badly. I know people will get this, a lot of people will take the servants from them. But it isn't across the board. We have a lot of the hotels in Barbados, a lot of them have replaced the old plantations, slavery plantations. You know? And they treat workers very badly. So they are afraid that if the workers get the opportunity to claim severance, that they can claim it. They're frightened. They're frightened because of their bad HR practices and the abusive way they treat their workers. They steal their service charge. I have sisters who work in the hotels in the 70s. They used to bring home more money in the 70s than the people in the hotels get now. I'm talking dollar for dollar. But these hotels rake in the money and then pretend the money even got money to pay water bills. You know? A lot of them left it outside. They don't let come to Barbados. They got money. But I'm not so interested in taking away the money from them. I want them to treat the workers well. I remember this you know, they do everything wrong, and then the government comes and gets stampeded into bringing legislation to protect them from their own bad behaviors. One, you know, they have gone, let me pull it up here. One of the things that trouble me is that they have ousted the jurisdiction of the tribunals for these cases. These cases don't go before the tribunal. These ones that come up now under this amendment, the tribunals will not do these cases. So I'm asking you, if the government is so interested in workers rather than hotels, if it takes so long to process the claims and the government recognizes this, what happened to the cases in 2012 where the government start dealing with those? There were 20 some odd people that made that for one hotel alone, and then seek to oust the jurisdiction of the tribunals to protect the people who are claiming 2012, 13, 14, 15, down to now. And people still go away 4 and 5 years, but the hoteliers jump up and behave bad on WhatsApp, and you can rush to Parliament a week later. Those people that you are forgetting voted for you, you know. You think you get 30 love because them people didn't vote? Those were the voters. The Italian fellow that keep the noise, he had one vote. But the hundreds of people waiting at National Insurance to get their claims are hundreds of votes. But you don't care about that now. You care about that in 2023. Right now you have to please the people who shake the whip at you and say, snap the whip and you jump. But I was so offended, you know, when I saw it. People said it to me as a joke, but I didn't take it as a joke. I think he was rude and offensive. Mind you, sometimes I tell the Prime Minister certain things too, but we get a bit of that. But he can't go on WhatsApp, I don't care if it's on WhatsApp, and carry on. You know, and carried on. And given and he said they were supposed to go to Parliament and do it Tuesday. That was last Tuesday. And because he gave the impression that he could control this government from behind. You know, we had a former MP who used to talk about the white shadows. But he ain't white, but he's a shadow. He's a shadow controlling from behind. And we have a situation that government rushing with ill-advised legislation to That could have been, even if you wanted to do this, you could have done with a directive. You understand the emergency. But, no, these few words aren't finished yet. I'm in the middle. You have a situation now. You have a situation now where you are moving it from 13 weeks to 22 weeks. That's 9 more weeks, right? You really feel that's going to be covered in 9 more weeks? You rush without thinking. Because all you have done is to delay the process now for another 9 weeks. Because if the people are going to claim service, they're going to claim it 9 weeks from down the road. Because the hotels are not getting up. Because the people come to Barbados, they suffer with COVID too. They may come here with the planes and things. You hear how many people died in the outside world that some of them come to Barbados? They ain't coming. So in 9 weeks, the hotels will not recover. So what are you going to do? Pass another amendment? Yes. It would appear they have to do that. So you only protected them for 9 weeks. But what the big joke though is, if you were laid off or held on short time for 16 weeks, in a 26-week period, you could claim severance. Now you feel it changing things. Without thinking what you're changing. So you change it to 18 weeks in a 24-week period, so you shorten the period. But worse yet, a guy could be laid off for 9 weeks, come back on for a week, and then get laid off for another 9 weeks, and he can claim severance pay before the fellow who's on 22 weeks. So what are you doing? You're not making sense. This thing troubles me. I hate when government do these silly things to please their friends. Now my big problem. Clause 3, and you inserted a 6B. A 6B? B? See? I think I remember B. Let me just double check. 6B. The minister may make an order. The minister may, by order, prescribe the procedure for investigating and settling claims. So why that order? Why the order minister ain't coming here? No, because when this legislation ousts the jurisdiction of the tribunal, the minister has to put something in place. Who or what is the something that the minister got to put in place? You don't think we should know? But it means that we are making a sense. There's no need for us, if you're going to bring legislation and then slide in the most important part in the regulation or by an order. The orders should accompany this bill as a schedule, so that we would know what the minister is doing for the people who went off in the COVID emergency. And then I would be asking the minister, as I said earlier, to do it for the other people. We rush off without thinking. Let me tell you early this morning, they get things wrong the first time, every time. Because I tell her, you think, I don't mind helping you? Let me address something you said. Senator Walker. You said that I refuse to come to these meetings. I didn't refuse to come. I was going to the meetings, I was participating, and then one day a newspaper called me and said, I heard that they're going to have these 4 savings. What are your views? I said, that's madness. And I explained to them why you can't do it. So the newspaper published my views. So my view was opposed to the 4 savings. So the next time I had a meeting, they talk about the 4 savings, they're going to invite me. So I felt hurt to be treated this way. After all, I went to those meetings, and I gave my all, and I spoke, and I was free and everything else. And then you, because you heard my views and my views were not consistent, the ones that you wanted to hear, you decide that you don't want me? No, that's what happened though. Because they put me on a WhatsApp chat group so that they would send invitations to me. They would even send them then on my email, and then they would still get a call on my phone. All three of those systems failed for that meeting. All three. No WhatsApp, no email, no call on the phone. I said they didn't want me there. I heard about the meeting when it was ongoing. So I was hoping, I said somebody, but I remember a time they called me and said, Caswell, you want to come to the meeting, they're ready to start. I said, but and they pleaded with me, I even get the, you know the day when you had that short sitting about the emergency? That was one of those meetings. I was in one of those meetings with the acting prime minister and stuff, so I got here when you people were coming out. Because I was attending the meetings, but I didn't want to hear my views. I said, well, if you don't want to hear me now, you don't want to hear me all the rest of the time, so I ain't coming to no more. Don't treat me with that kind of disrespect. I don't do it to anybody. You know my views. Good there. I love you. You know that. I would never treat you so. But don't ever expect me to turn up at those meetings when you want me. But when my views are not consistent, the ones that you want to hear, don't call me. Don't give me a WhatsApp. Don't give me a call. Don't give me nothing. Mm-mm. So that's why you don't see me after that time. And I mentioned it more than once, and I said, you will apologize for that oversight, or you will not see me. I don't care where the apology coming from. It would better come from the Prime Minister. But she does not apologize. Anyhow, so that is why you don't see me, sir. This bill, these are my notes. This bill is unnecessary. It does not make sense. I would still like, as I said, I would like it explained why the rush to do this, and so what are you going to do? What is the purpose of this bill? The hotels will not, they will still, in another 9 weeks, they're going to still have the same liability. It's just going to be 9 more weeks. You see, people ask, be careful what you ask for. But these people didn't even know what they were asking for. But they asked because they have a compliant administration who's willing to jump every time they want something done. I hope you jump when the masses of the people ask you to do things too. Because look at this. This is embarrassing. I say no more. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Next, recognize the contribution of Senator Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the amendment before us is one that is difficult for me to debate this evening. And the reason for that difficulty is because I do not believe that we needed to be here debating the amendment. An amendment is being proposed. An amendment is being proposed within a context where we have functioning a government that understands communication, that does it well. Just a few hours ago, I was speaking on a BOSS program. A BOSS program that I could support wholeheartedly because underlying the rollout of that program has been communication, so that the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, someone put it, I'm paraphrasing, could perhaps be the Prime Minister of Communications. Boss move in communicating. The changes before us seek to address an issue that a blind man on a dark night could have spotted from a distance. From the time we found ourselves in an environment where, not that our borders were closed, but commercial traffic was not coming to Barbados, that was perhaps the biggest obvious signal that we were going to be in trouble, especially since so much was going on in the world around us that would suggest that it would not be likely that our situation would change anytime soon. Here we are, today is the 17th of June. 2 months since we've had commercial activity coming into the country. So on the 15th of April, in a conversation with representatives from the tourism sector, representatives from NIS, a representative from another union, on April the 15th, I signaled that, because we've been hearing things, nothing formally put, but we'd been hearing, as you would expect, that there was a flag raised, a concern raised about a 13-week trigger, obviously for tourism, because if there is no activity going on, and we know that tourism was pretty much slammed, practically all the workers home in the hotels and other areas, that the legislation that allows a worker to trigger an intention to claim at 13 weeks would become something that we had to address quite early. I say that. Then, Mr. President, a tourism task force. Now, this proposal is not only about tourism. This is about any worker in any sector who's able to trigger severance at 13 weeks. But I specify tourism and hotels maybe more so because this is the one area or the largest single grouping that would be impacted by what we are discussing here this evening. So a tourism task force was put together. No input from labor on that task force. I learned, like a number of other people learned, about 10 days ago, that a recommendation coming out of that task force was for the trigger to be deferred from 13 weeks to possibly 40 weeks or 52 weeks. Reason being that it was not felt by that task force that tourism will rebound anytime soon. So notwithstanding the fact that Barbados only has provision for unemployment benefit up to 26 weeks, a proposal from the task force was for the trigger of severance to be deferred for 40 weeks or 52 weeks with no supporting proposal for an extension of unemployment benefit if you had deferred for that length of time. So perhaps in my simplicity, I said, but if you can propose one thing, then you gotta bring balance to a situation that would answer a question. What's in it for me? All right. I spoke about communication. I started there. I spoke about what we'd been hearing. I spoke about what was formally put about 10 days ago by this tourism task force. It was only at the point that was put in a social partnership meeting. And Labor opposed it, naturally. Well, no. In fairness, it was put by the private sector about 2 weeks before that, before we knew what the task force said. And the same point, I don't know if to say regrettably or otherwise, but the same point Senator Franklin is raising is the point that was the point of labor in that meeting. What if a hotel or a company gonna be mashed up in 13 weeks? How you expect that they're gonna pay severance in another 13? Because in the social partnership meeting, 40 or 52 didn't factor, it was 26. So you're hearing different things. 26, 40, 52. Because we playing with numbers like if it's the lottery. There was no response to that question. But the chairman of the social partnership, who was undertaking her second meeting since coming back out from sick leave, recognized immediately we got a problem here. Labor in part of these discussions, so we got to bring in labor. So labor was brought into the discussions at the 11th hour. What do you mean by the 11th hour? Just before some properties were expecting that the 13 weeks could be triggered. And Mr. President, I lamented then what I'm lamenting now, that we find ourselves in this moment with a government that knows what it is to communicate well with people, with a country that is getting accustomed over the last 2 years to communicating well at a number of levels. We find ourselves in a moment where we have failed to take truth to the people so that the people can decide in their best interests. So yes, there are a number of people, a number of workers in hotels even, that have signaled, we don't want severance. We don't want trigger severance. We know that there ain't no jobs coming in 13 weeks likely. There ain't gonna be none coming beyond that. But while we can see down the line, we hope for the best. And we hope that these jobs will come sooner rather than later. Because if we take our $20,000 in severance now, once the 26 weeks in unemployment insurance has expired, and that money is used up, and we look around us, and all we're seeing is doom and gloom, no job prospects on the horizon, it makes no sense taking that $20,000 or that $30,000 or that $60,000, because the workers has got mortgages too, believe it or not, because some people don't behave as if they understand that. So they got commitments that may exceed by far the little lump sum that severance would bring. So a lot of workers have not been interested in expressing an option for severance. But yes, there are those workers that because of the ill treatment and the mistreatment will think twice and will say, I'd rather suffer on the outside than suffer on the inside. So let me take what's mine. Wait for years or not, let me opt out to this arrangement. We're talking about opting in and opting out a lot today. Let me opt out to this arrangement and take my chances. And the reason for that is that injustices have been prevailing the labor market. And already in this crisis that we are in, grievances have been spurring up and grievances have been deepening. There is a lot of mistrust and a sense of injustice over access to decent work and livelihoods of people. Earlier, in the earlier debate, I mentioned the one case, and I'm stressing the one case in construction, so that, like my fellow senator, people don't misunderstand and lump everybody in construction together and paint them by the same brush. We have the one case in construction as an example where an owner, a manager, putting his hand in people's money. Some may say, oh Lord, it's only 5%, why they don't take that and go along? Some people ain't got work. But putting his hand in people's money and supported by an attorney saying, the law allows us to do that. I want to know which law, which labor law in Barbados allows an employer to jerk his hand in people's money without their permission. Jerk, put, shove. And then to go before the Ministry of Labor, where this matter has been for almost 6 weeks, and say to the Chief Labor Officer, we only come here for so, but this matter ain't rightfully before you. We just coming to let you know that we ain't coming back. In Barbados. The union, because of this, is also facing similar mistrust. Because if we could be members of a union, if my union can protect me against this, and if I go to the Labor Department and the Labor Department can protect me against this, then what are we going to do? So now the union and the comrade, I call her the comrade, fellow senator, raised it. And she read from a newspaper, online newspaper, that is saying that the workers may have to enforce a shutdown in the same way that COVID would enforce a shutdown. So a shutdown can be a shutdown for a handful of workers. If the workers can do it, if you're talking shutdown, it got to be across the country though. It got to be impacting all the other areas that can support that handful of workers in the injustice that's being meted out to them. Mr. President, injustice and mistrust is being felt by too many workers in tourism. The very sector that has been pushing for this thing, the sector that's supposed to be this country's backbone, up until 3 months ago, and hopefully a sector that will continue to contribute meaningfully to this country's economic development. Workers who were put on 2 months layoff, who up to now and receive a layoff certificate in tourism. Injustice and mistrust is mounting among those workers in that industry and others who have been given jobs on the proviso that you don't join a union. If somebody tell you don't join a union, what are they telling you? What are they telling you? They are telling you that inherent in your contract is exploitation that we don't want you to be protected against. They are saying to you that you are to have no voice. You are to take what you get. And if a union, within the context where that in the exception to the rule, but where it is a growing trend, don't give expression to the people who get a hand jerk in the salary. If a union don't give expression to them, then you're giving credence. You're validating all the other employers who saying, don't join a union. Because whether you're in a union or not, we can do what we want to do here. Injustice and mistrust. Injustice and mistrust emerges when a worker goes into his or her workplace and knows that 30 years ago, 30 years from now, the job that they are doing is a job that is necessary to that company and to that sector. But instead of formal employment, what happens? You bring in somebody contract, get a half or a portion of the amount that you're giving the formal worker. You're not paying NIS for them. You ain't paying income tax either because they're on what? A contract for service for 3 months at a time in tourism and other places too. So workers are seeing a deformalization or informalization of our labor market in Barbados. And informalization, some may call it entrepreneurship, some may call it enfranchisement, but what it is and what it offers is limited or no security to the worker who has to work in that sector. The largest sector now in Barbados, the informal sector. Injustice and mistrust, Mr. President, is being meted out where we could see the face of business enterprise in the social partnership, crying out for help for business support and business sustainability. And that same face in their local context, the company that they work for, sent home almost 150 people without reference to the union, without reference to the labor department. I will want to sit down against me or alongside me and anybody else and say this is a time that we all have to do what we have to do to share the burden, carry the burden. That same face of business enterprise not only lay off people just like that because COVID-19 now has been force majeure and caused us to do things in an unprecedented way, so we get on like we lost sense and sensibility and laws don't exist and then the employment rate sat and there's no reference point, there's no need for consultation. That same face of labor, and only doing that, but looking at the cashier who only making $1,400 a month and saying that I need to take 5% from that. I don't know how to spend $1,400 a month. So if I was only a senator, I would know how to spend. And that's what workers are facing. Injustice and mistrust emerges when workers have been on the front line, when we were in lockdown, when workers were in the supermarkets daily. And those workers were being lauded as what? Our frontline heroes. And people even started on Wednesday evenings to go out on the patios and the balconies and in front of the houses. And there were even competitions, who could sing, who could clap, who could dance the best in celebration of these workers who are the front line heroes. But you want to hear about injustice and mistrust? When the rest of the country was opening up, these workers was getting laid off. The supermarkets, Massy, A1. And then some of the people behind these same supermarkets will want to tell people like me and you and others that we should go there and support of a movement that supports black people that can't breathe. Black people can't breathe here in these workplaces. Can't breathe. Mistrust and injustice. So barring all the praise, barring all the clapping, barring all the songs of tribute, workers went from hero to zero in Barbados. Mr. President, Deputy President, against such levels of injustice and mistrust, no wonder why what we in Labour think is unnecessary has been thought to be necessary to bring before this chamber this evening. Because if there is mistrust, and if there is as much injustice as we say there is, why should an employer think that going and talking to his staff, her staff, won't see the staff saying, you don't talk to me? Why had that issue? Because when it started with the hotels, just under a week and a half, about a week and a half ago, in the very first meeting, and Senator Grant may choose to bear me out or not. I said, don't bring them back here, because there was some of them I can look across at and compartmentalize. There's some that I would never be able to look across at and see the issue and not them. So I said, don't bring them back. The next day, the delegation was less than half of what it was. Injustice and mistrust prevents us sometimes from being able to respond in a responsive and responsible manner to the call of nationhood, because the faces of mistrust are ever present. And in times of crisis when we need to band together, we don't want to hear them. Not because that what it's saying might be wrong, but because we don't want to hear it from them. We can't reconcile it if it's coming from them. So the BHTA had to take a lot, endure a lot, and they have committed to their own credit. But a promise is a comfort to a fool. Yeah, I know that I ain't a fool. So the debate that is before us is one that Labour was brought into at the 11th hour. And that debate reignited feelings of mistrust and highlighted the injustices and caused workers and their representatives to openly lament that Barbados labour market is trending towards development and investment capital without a balance to values and rights. And this is the struggle this evening for me. Because personally, I sit on the NIS board. And I know that if workers had to trigger, and if workers had to trigger in numbers, that these employers will say they can't. And when the employers say they can't, whose responsibility does it become? It becomes the responsibility of the national insurance, my social security contributions, and all of those who are still paying in the reduced formal sector. It becomes our responsibility. Crisis is a time that we are required to be vigilant. And that vigilance don't just speak about being watchful. Vigilance requires of all of us as leaders not to allow ourselves to be preoccupied by distractions, by bullies, by people holding whips. Because if we do that, we might miss the boat on issues of greater importance. So yes, I'm one of those people that has said and will continue to say that this piece of social architecture, the severance payment legislation, has no right being tampered with. I think that it is sacrosanct. I say that at the same time that I recognize that because of the banditry that exists in so many areas, there is a likelihood that people may make decisions not in their own interests, but because they just need to find a way out. So this is a stage where I think that an organization whose mission I live places me in a position where I can see the paradox in the mission, because it's to be a leading representative, a leader in offering trade union services, but yet it's supposed to improve the way of life of all in the same mission. So how do you not give in to banditry and tampering with the workers' rights without undermining a social security system? Where there is no vision, the people perish. That's a scripture verse to Proverbs 29:18. I think what scripture.
I know.
And that's a verse that underpins the contribution here this evening, mine at least. Improving the lives and well-being of all. That vision propels us to dig deep, to see if the sacrifice of any right can make a difference in the living and the existence of all of us. We deserve more. We deserve better. But is this the moment to fight? Lack of vigilance may very well undermine the decent work agenda to which the labor movement subscribes. Because part of that agenda, an important pillar, is employment creation. And if you ain't got establishments, and if you ain't got no work, then you ain't got no workers. So there's a balance. If the experience of COVID cannot teach us, cannot inspire us, cannot make us understand that all of us have to do more to make Barbados as great as our anthem says we should inspire to be, then I don't think that there is anything that will. And I see a responsibility for all of us in this chamber, in the lower house, in the labor movement, in the private sector. Everybody has a responsibility now, not to treat and say, well, it ain't me, it ain't my concern, so I ain't gonna worry about it. But each of us have that remedial responsibility. We gotta be able to encourage people to do better, to change the situation for all of us. So I lament, Mr. President, I see you signaling me that we didn't manage that communication. I lament. I don't apologize for this. No, I don't lament. I don't think that mine is a position of naivety. There's a president of the United States, a former one, not the one that I don't know. He said, I believe that if people are given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts. And I believe that if people in an early enough time were given the real facts, that what was feared and what is the response in this chamber this evening will not have to result. So I just want to say some things very quickly. Recognizing that a government has 29 and a half seats, I recognize quite early that you might be fighting an uphill battle, right? So within that context, just like boss, because if I can't find an alternative, I can try to make the best of what you're going to deal with to make sure it don't bring the worst for the people I care about. So the first thing was to make sure that sunset comes sooner rather than later. So don't kick that can down the road too far, so July 31st. Sunset gotta come with built-in guarantees. I understand all of this because the people at Grand Barbados was mine before them was Senator Franklin one because they left me and gone to he because they figured 10 years is too long. I was pregnant when the last case was heard at the tribunal. My daughter is now 7.5 years old. And that case was started 2.5 years after it was summoned. So I understand what it is to be waiting in line, and I understand that there's 1,765 other cases before the tribunal. And even if we kick the can down the road to accommodate some, that people against goss, even if they trigger at 13 weeks, going to be joining the line at 1,766 and waiting for their turn to come. So I understand severance in on the immediate horizon for anybody. So to build in guarantees, that ministerial order, which I agree should be here so that we could spell it out. What we discussed in those meetings was that people should be guaranteed a severance without jumping through hoops. And that the modality should have been worked out. And yes, it should have been brought to us. But that will see people within less than a year, perhaps by the end of this year, getting this severance in hand when 22 weeks come. Because when 22 weeks come, it's going to be the same result for many, not all, as when 13 weeks come. The other thing that we tried to do was to ensure that the offenders, including those who had the frontline workers as heroes and the ones that's no zero, that them can be the ones to benefit from this. That when 13 weeks come, a supermarket who lay off the people will go pay them severance if the worker triggers that intention to claim the severance and follows through with the recommendations. So I know the atmosphere in here tanks, because this requires 2/3 majority too. And the atmosphere in here should be tanks, because we are right here. I can sit down with folks saying whether I support or not, because I still tune in front. I still tune in front in my head, because if there's one person that feels disadvantaged because their right was deferred, that's a concern for me, albeit that we've built in a number of contingencies that will seek to answer what's in it for me. But if I had to support this measure at the end of this debate, it won't be on account of the employment relations bandits. It won't be about easing them. And it won't be because I intend to disadvantage a worker who can trigger at 13. It would be because I understand that I have tried in some way to get a built-in provision for that worker that if you trigger at 22 weeks and not 13, you don't got dead, hopefully, before you get what's yours. And I agree that it signals to us, and if it is one good thing that should have come out of this, is that we understand that those 1,765 people are also being disadvantaged, and that something needs to be done to remedy that situation too in quick time, because no more should have to die without being able to claim their due. Mr. President, thanks for the additional time.
Senator Dr. Lynette Holder.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm pleased for the opportunity to make a short contribution following after Senator Moore. I'm not going to be as long. But you clearly had some issues to address. I actually enjoyed the presentation. And Mr. President, I must preface my short presentation by saying I clearly had to refocus my thoughts in light of the presentation from Senator Moore. I will begin with this thought, first of all. I understand clearly that there are some injustices in the labor market in Barbados. I don't think that there's anyone in this chamber that will deny any knowledge of this reality. The fact is that this COVID environment has exacerbated even this situation in Barbados. And more often than not, the decisions are being made offshore. More often than not, the decisions are being made by HR departments and by owners and managers and so on that are not here in Barbados. I'm very much aware of that. And I will go on record in saying to Senator Moore that I will support any effort on the part of the unions in this country to highlight these injustices and to do something about them. I support that. I go on record in saying that. I'm sure that all the folks in this chamber on this side, I maybe can speak for, that's right, will support that. Because we have fought for decades. And actually one of the points that I had here to make, let us not forget that it is the Barbados Labour Party as a party, if you recall, whose founder would have started the Barbados Workers' Union. And I heard Senator Moore speak earlier today that shortly it will be 80 years that you'll be celebrating your operations here in Barbados. But let us remember that it was the late Sir Grantley Adams that started this union, the founder of this party, who ensured that labor was not just in our name, but labor is in the DNA and the philosophy of this Barbados Labour Party. So we have an interest in ensuring that the workers in this country are protected, and we therefore will fight for that. I want to give that assurance as I begin my presentation. So I support a lot of what Senator Moore had to say. I think that the time is right. This is the time that the union's voice must be brought to bear not only in such debates, but maybe in the necessary action that will bring attention to those who lead, that they cannot come to these shores and mistreat the employees in their firms and mistreat the people of Barbados. They can't do it. So I support that. I want, following on from that, to refer to Senator Franklin's opening comment, where he said that, and I quote, "It's a puzzle to me why we are debating this legislation. I understand that most things puzzle Senator Franklin. I'm very much aware of that. But I thought that a lot of what was said, Mr. President, can be construed as a miscarriage of good judgment. Because at the end of the day, despite that one hotel that Senator Franklin constantly refers to, which I understand it is unionized, and I think that you need to do something about it. Beyond that, the legislation before this chamber tonight, Mr. President, is intended to ensure that we are able to keep businesses afloat. I go back to my thought last Wednesday, and I feel as if I may have to continue from that presentation. Because this, again, is another piece of legislation similar to the catastrophe fund that we debated last Wednesday, similar to the BOSS legislation earlier today. All of these are responses to the current situation and the current crisis that we are in as a country. Let us not ever forget that. Will I suggest that we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's? I'm going to admit that some things are not as perfect as we would like. The fact is, we know, and I know that the Prime Minister of this country makes the point all the time, that perfection is left for the divine. I support that too. We will not find perfection. But we must always keep within context what we are setting about to do. The fact is, and I heard it from one of the earlier speakers, that the majority of employees in this country do not really want to be severed. The majority of employees in this country do not want to lose their jobs. I know that there are a few who are frustrated with immoral employers, who are frustrated with the work conditions in some of the firms and they want to leave. Yes, I am aware of that, and let us treat to that. But the majority of employees do not want to lose their jobs. And so this particular amendment this afternoon, this is intended to help us to address the majority, if you will, and to maintain an environment that firms do not at this time have to pay severance, because a lot of them can't. Let us appreciate that. And employees can at least maintain that legal relationship with their employer, and that they can return to work whenever that time is lifted. Mr. President, I was in a meeting on Monday gone, a social partnership meeting. And I sat and I heard, I will call that firm a medium enterprise, because I'm aware of the firm and have, based on the definitions that we use in the marketplace, an idea of maybe their staffing and revenues and so on. So I would consider that a medium enterprise. And I heard that business owner, Mr. President, say pigmentation is me, making the point that even if she wanted to, at this time, sever her staff, she calculated that it would cost in the order of $1.5 million, of which she does not have at this point in time. And I sat there and I listened to that. Yesterday in my office, I'm speaking again to an employer, I would say a medium enterprise again, who is also lamenting, having heard of this piece of legislation that has come into the House, that she too cannot afford at this time to pay severance. So I think that when you put it into context, we had two senators this morning trying to contextualize the earlier piece of legislation, all the bills that we will debate, I would suggest must always be put into context. You have to contextualize what it is you are bringing to the chamber for consideration. And when you put it within the context, barring, yes, issues that need to be improved upon, the fact is that we want to ensure, Mr. President, that we can show up businesses. At the end of the day, this is about maintaining the operations of our firms, keeping our businesses open. This is what this is about. And when I speak about businesses, I am not, Mr. President, talking about big business per se. Anyone who knows me, knows my ideology, knows that I do not propose to be an apologist for big business. I am not. But I understand how an economy functions. I understand that we need all forms, all sizes, micro, small, medium, and large firms within the economy. Last week I made the point, and maybe it's worthy of repetition. They say repetition is the mother of learning. That there are three players within the economy: business, government, and households. Governments don't trade. Households don't trade. It is the business that trades. It is the business that generates economic activity. It is a business, Mr. President, that we rely on to employ persons within the households and therefore manage the households. It is a business that we rely on to give government the revenues that it needs to be able to provide the social services for the country and to be able to keep our economy going. It is business. So this is not, Mr. President, about trying to pander to the likes of one particular hotelier who may be on a WhatsApp video and spouting whatever he feels like. This is not about that. This is about ensuring that the thousands of firms in this country who are affected by the conditionalities of COVID have a little more wiggle room relative to how they treat to the layoff conditions for employees. This is what this is about. Not that particular hotelier. Not the other one that was mentioned that is down on the West Coast. It cannot be about them. It cannot be about one or two firms. So I may stand here tonight, and I can use back the term, I'm an apologist, if you will, for government at this time. I have to defend this situation, Mr. President, because it is being brought within the context of us trying to keep firms afloat. I heard the term of force majeure. This is what this is. These are unusual circumstances. Now let's get some statistics, because I see persons looking at me and they want data. So we are not talking about the one or two firms, but let's understand how our private sector is really made up. The data is maybe a bit old. I go back all the time to that Sally 6 UWI survey commissioned by an organization that I lead that has given us quantifiable information. Mr. President, the big business that people talk about, based on that survey, is 3.6% of firms in this country. 3.6% of firms, based on that Sally 6 report, would be what we define as big business. And of the labor market, that 3.6% of firms represent 39% of our employees. So that tells me that the majority of businesses in this country are in the other group, the micro, small, and medium enterprise group. Let me remove the micro for now, which is under 5 employees. Let me remove them. Let's deal with small and medium, because that restaurant owner that I referred to, that I heard on Monday, that's a medium enterprise. Popular restaurant up there on Hastings Bay Road. Most of us are here go there, I believe. That's a medium enterprise. The printery that I spoke to yesterday, not a printery in Wildy, But in one of the BIDC units, again, a medium enterprise, these are firms, Mr. President, employing 15 persons and 20 persons and 10 persons. But these have been affected by this environment. And these account for 51% of the formal businesses in this country. 51%. Those small and medium players that employ between 5 and 50 persons represent 51% of the formal firms. Now you can imagine the households that they impact. You can imagine the level of wealth creation that they're contributing to. And when you go further and drill down further, the data suggests that small firms account for some 42% of employees in this country. Medium enterprises, some 15% of employees in this country. And this is what this legislation tonight is about. Let us keep it in context, Senator Franklin. Keep it within context. We want to make sure that at this time they are able to get that wiggle room. Now, the legislation says that Section 6A2, that where an employee has been laid off or kept on short time, as a result of, look at the two conditionalities. One, the restrictions on international travel due to the declaration of a public health emergency. We know that has happened. The consequent restriction in the operation of business imposed by the making of the emergency management directives. We know that has happened. So as a result of this reality, those firms that I referred to earlier, Mr. President, many of them tried to hold on as long as they could. Some had to lay off because they had no choice. At the end of the day, any of us who've had business experience understands how you struggle as a business owner, as a manager, to make sure that your firm can be competitive, that you can pay your bills. There's some persons who can't appreciate this, you know. Mr. President, I understand it very well. I know that Senator Moore does too. Having a firm and come Friday, you have to pay your staff. You have to look for the money to pay your staff, even when employees go home and they can sleep and they can rest well. Managers, owners of businesses can't do so because you're scratching your head. You're getting gray hairs. How do I look those employees in the face come Friday? Those employees that have little children to take care of, they have mortgages, some have to pay rent, and say to them, I can't pay you today. That is a horrific feeling to have. This is what this bill is about. This is what it is about. You know, James Carville in 1992 said, as a key strategist to the Bill Clinton campaign at the time, it's about the economy, stupid. It's about the economy, stupid. I'm not calling anybody stupid. Right? But to make the point that at the end of the day is about the economy and ensuring that the economy can keep taking over. I know people don't like to talk about the economy. There's an administration that through their propaganda machinery once said, you know, what they said about the economy is more than, it's not, what, you know, kind of nonsense, Mr. President. Not understanding that if you don't have a vibrant and strong economy, you don't have a vibrant and strong society. But you see, they can manage the economy, so they coined that. Maybe their strategists told them, you put that out there as a part of your propaganda, you're able to fool people. Because even the wisest man of his time, in one of his books, said that feast is made for laughter, wine made to make you merry, but money answers everything. He understood it. And he said that in Ecclesiastes chapter 10. He understood the power of money. He understood the power of trade. Understood it. And so, recognizing the importance of having a vibrant economy taking over, as I mentioned before, this is how government gets its revenue, and the points have been made today, last week, Wednesday, and I'm sure if we come back here next Wednesday, the points will be made again. Government will lose $500 million conservatively in this fiscal year because of what is happening. So it has to do what is needed within the law, what is morally sound to keep the economy afloat. This is what it is about, Mr. President. This is what it's about. And so my final thought, I said it wasn't going to be long, so let me quickly get to my final thought. No, Mr. Senator Moore, no. I'm gonna come in at least 15 minutes under you. Watch me. This is my final thought. Mr. President, I am satisfied there have been consultations in the last few months. I'm sure Senator Grant will bear me out on this. It bothers me when people, for convenient reasons, try to cast the aspersion that there's something wrong when the unions of this country sit and dialogue with government. For convenient reasons, I abhor the thought. As if there's something wrong. Unions should not be sitting down with government to talk on issues. But they need to. You hear it in the calling programs and the various parties. There's so many of them now, it's a bit challenging sometimes to follow. And they're rushing, want to get their 5 minutes of fame. 30 seconds. And saying all kinds of things that are void of common sense even at times. Mm-hmm. But Mr. President, this administration, and I am proud of this. I think I heard Senator Moore make the point earlier about communication. I am proud of this. Has been involved in a series of consultations, not as a PR gimmick, Mr. President, but out of a sincere demonstration of what leadership ought to be about, especially in times of crises, to make sure that we bring to bear all of the skills needed to help govern our ship of state at this time. And maybe outside of Senator Grant, I don't think that there's anyone else in the chamber that was around in the last 10 to 12 years. Senator Walker is a veteran, yes. He's a veteran. But we were in the business support organizations and so on. I had to be a part of social partnership meetings and all that. And we could attest to the fact that with the earlier crisis that we had, we got a good history lesson about all the crises from the 1970s, earlier today. We can attest to the fact, Mr. President, that with the last crisis, the financial crisis, that was said to have been the worst in 100 years, we can attest, Mr. President, that there was not the level of consultation that we're seeing today. To the point where the unions, I remember Senator Moore arguing, making a case that we need to meet, we need to have conversation, we need to dialogue because of the deleterious effect of this crisis on the Barbados economy. Mr. President, if we had one social partnership meeting in a year, we had a lot. I'm telling you. If you had one, Mr. President, no, we having a social partnership meeting every week. Every week, to the point those of us who've been around now for a while, I have actually heard people saying, oh Lord, there's too many meetings now. I mean, meeting too often now. Huh? But we pray for it, see? The Lord answer prayer. Right? To the point where people are saying, but we're meeting so often now. But there's an urgency of the moment that requires that we have these kinds of consultations. And so the decisions that come out of these meetings, Mr. President, are not decisions made by the government alone, but these are the decisions made by all of the key partners within the social partnership. A social partnership, by the way, that has been expanded to include the third sector, civil society, under this administration. So I think that it is foolhardy for persons out there to be making a point. Why is it government and the unions are meeting and talking and so on and try to cast aspersions upon that process? This is what leadership is about. Now, if the principle of the trade union known as the Unity Trade Union don't want to be a part of those consultations, then that is rather unfortunate. But the kind of mature leadership that is needed at this point in time, Mr. President, I would think would beckon him to be at the table so he can represent the hundreds of members, especially hundreds that have joined his trade union since he became a senator. So I would think he would want to be at the table to represent them and represent their interests. So I want to make that point as I wrap up. Right? To those out there who want to beat up on trade unions, trying to cast aspersions and so on, this is what leadership in crises require. So, Mr. President, as I said, put this bill in context. This bill is about helping that third player within the economy, critical player, called business. So that the other two planks, government and households, can be supported somewhat and kept afloat at this time. The hour demands it, Mr. President. So with those few words, I give my support to the bill before us. Thank you very much.
No. Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting be suspended for 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
Question is that this session be suspended for 30 minutes so that we can have a short dinner. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we're in suspension for the next 30 minutes.
45 minutes.
Come back in 45.